Hoy tomamos la decisión ejecutiva en el programa de traerles a probablemente el hombre más famoso a nivel mundial que habla sobre el tema de la felicidad y la psicología positiva. Seguramente cuando diga su nombre, muchos de ustedes lo conocen muy bien, porque seguramente lo han leído, porque lo han escuchado en alguna conferencia, pero es un extraordinario autor, conferencista, enseñaba el curso más popular en la Universidad de Harvard sobre psicología positiva. Es especialista aparte en temas de liderazgo, de felicidad, de autoestima, de resiliencia, de establecimiento de metas, de conciencia. Su último libro es Atajos hacia la felicidad, lecciones que me cambiaron la vida y que aprendí de mi peluquero. O sea, se llama Shortcuts to Happiness, Life-Changing Lessons from My Barber. Es cofundador y director de aprendizaje de la Academia de Estudios de la Felicidad, Happiness Studies Academy. Y para mí es un gran gusto tener el día de hoy en el programa a Tal Ben-Shahar, que seguramente muchos de ustedes conocen. You are, as I was telling you, so incredibly famous, Tal.
Thank you, Martha. You know, it's so great to speak to you, and it reminds me of the amazing times that I had in Mexico. I miss your country so much. And my family does, because we were there for vacation, we were there for work. Every excuse we find, we visit.
Well, I'm so happy you like our country as much as we like you. You always come up, you know, like every month there's somebody on the show mentioning your name. So it's fantastic to talk to you. And what I was saying at the beginning of the show is everything that we've lived for the last 9 months has, you know, like sequestered a tidbit of our happiness, of our peace of mind. So I think this conversation is fantastic. The 10 keys of happiness, if we can do that in 1 hour. But haven't you seen the peaks of happiness going down?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing now actually are levels of anxiety and depression are essentially at an all-time high. Meaning, since the time we started measuring, you know, it could be higher maybe during, you know, the World War II or during the previous pandemic. But since we started measuring, we had never encountered such high levels of depression and anxiety around the world.
Wow, that's incredible. So I just want you to get something out of the way. What percentage of our own personal happiness is our responsibility, and how much of that is, you know, God and our parents and genetics?
Right. I'm glad you asked that. It's a good place to start, because what the research shows is that on average, and I'm emphasizing average, on average, 50% of our happiness level is determined by our genetic makeup or very early experiences. In other words, things we have no control over. On average, 10% depends on external circumstances, and 40% on average depends on our choices. Now, the reason why I emphasized average is for the following reason. Think about the 10% external circumstances. It's not a lot. But what about a person who lives in a war zone or in dire poverty? Those external circumstances will influence their happiness levels much more than 10%. Similarly, there are situations, there are cases where genetics matter more than 50%. And what's important for us to understand is that when it comes to our choices, we can affect our happiness levels more than 40% if we know how.
Okay, now explain, before we talk about our decisions, how do you mean genetics and how do you mean early childhood experiences?
Yeah.
Like, give me a couple of examples.
So look, I often say to my students that I'm the right person to teach happiness. Why? Because I was born with anxious genes. You know, when my family, when we look back, you know, our ancestors, there's always anxiety there. So, you know, that's genetic. I didn't ask for it. Neither did my parents. We were born with it. Now, early experiences, of course, matter as well. You know, are we loved? Are we supported when we're very young? During a time when we have no control over what we do, how we react, whether or not we internalize. So this is 50%, but again, it's just average. If you take 1 million people and you aggregate it, on average, 50%. The question is, how can we increase the 40% that is up to us? So how do we increase those 40%? And the answer is by being mindful of the choices that we have. For example, many of the choices in life that we have are what I call rhetorical choices or obvious choices. So for instance, if I ask you, so Martha, do you want to appreciate the good things in your life?
Absolutely.
Or do you want to take the good things in your life for granted? The answer is obvious, whomever we ask. And yet, most people, most of the time, take the good things in their lives for granted. Why? Because they're not aware at each moment that they have a choice, that they can choose to appreciate. So if we become more aware of the choices that we have, that 40% can go up significantly.
So how do you make that conscious decision?
So what we need are reminders in our lives. Reminders, for example, to be grateful for the things that we have, or reminders to be kind and generous. Because, again, it's a rhetorical choice whether or not I should be kind, whether it's to my family members, whether it's to my friends. And yet we so often forget because we so often take them for granted. So what kind of reminders? Well, we can have external reminders like wearing a bracelet, for instance, or having a reminder on our screensaver on the computer. Another way to do it is to introduce rituals into our lives. And in this respect, psychology can learn a lot from religion, because religion throughout the ages has relied on rituals. For example, why in religion is the emphasis on praying every day? Why? Because they want to introduce rituals, repetitive action. And each time we go to a place of worship, we are reminded of the kind of self that we want to be. In the same way, we need to introduce reminders into our lives of the kind of person that we want to be: kind, appreciative, generous, or whatever it is that we want to introduce into our lives.
What rituals have you seen have worked the best for people that you work with?
Yeah. So, for example, the ritual of expressing gratitude on a regular basis. Every night before I go to sleep, I write down at least 5 things for which I'm grateful. This is a ritual that we know contributes to happiness, contributes to success. It also contributes to our physical well-being. In other words, our immune system gets stronger. That's one ritual. Another ritual is waking up in the morning and either meditating or taking a few deep breaths to center ourselves. Another very important ritual, and by the way, this is especially important during these times of high stress: physical exercise. Regular physical exercise, at least 3-4 times a week for 30 minutes each time. A ritual is also spending time with family, and spending time with family while the phone is off, while technology is off, and you're just with them, or with friends, but cultivating relationships. These are just some of the important rituals that we need to introduce into our lives. When we think about bringing about change, it's helpful to think about the 3 R's. And the 3 R's are reminders, repetition, and rituals. And again, these 3 R's are taken straight from religion. And today we have the research to show how important they are for bringing about change. So reminders is about reminding me of the kind of person that I want to be, the best version of myself. This would be the equivalent of a prayer, for instance, in religion. Then, as a result of the reminders, I repeat the same action over and over again, whether it's exercising regularly, whether it's expressing gratitude, whether it's being kind, whether it's spending time with family and friends, whatever it is. That's the reminders. As a result of the reminders, we create rituals. And this is important because the rituals are quite literally new neural pathways in our brains. They actually change the way our brain functions. And in that, we are affecting our nature, where generosity or kindness or positivity become second nature to us because our brain actually changes. And this way, the 40% of choices takes away from the 50% of genes.
Of genetics, exactly.
Of genetics, and we're affecting our nature. Reminders, repetition, rituals.
And rituals. So it's so incredible what you just said, because I'm thinking of my own family, and to be, painfully honest in front of everybody, I think that in our family systems, for them to be able to recognize what type of ambiance predominates in their family. And in my family, whining and bitching about life and things is very normal. It's almost a habit. So I was thinking probably my brain, as well as the brain of my 2 daughters, because they've grown up with me, are probably wired in that manner, because we're so used to that, because that's how we've worked for ages, and that's how our neuron patterns work. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true, and the optimistic side of it is just that as it was created, it can be recreated. Meaning we have control over it. You, your daughters, all of us do. Our brains are plastic. It's funny during this period when when things are difficult for so many people. Many are asking me, what is the role of happiness? They're asking me, well, maybe we should quarantine happiness for a while until we feel a bit better. And my answer is that during these times, the science of happiness is especially important. Why? Because the science of happiness is not just about making us feel better when things are going well. It's also about helping us deal with difficulties and hardships. For example, it can help us a great deal in dealing with stress. It can help us a great deal in dealing with conflicts, whether it's in a relationship or at work. It can help us a great deal when we're feeling down in general. So the science of happiness contributes to good times. It also helps us to better deal with difficult times.
Abel, can you give me examples?
Yeah, so let's take stress. I mentioned earlier that stress levels, anxiety levels are at an all-time high right now. So what do we do? What does the science of happiness teach us about dealing with stress? Well, the most important thing that it teaches us is that actually stress in and of itself is not a problem. We're actually very good at dealing with stress. 5,000 years ago, we were dealing with the stress of a lion chasing us. Today, we're dealing with the stress of a pandemic or a report that we have to submit. But we can deal with stress. Think about the analogy on the physical level. You go to the gym and you're lifting weights. When you lift weights, you are stressing your muscles. Now, is that a bad thing? Not at all. It's a good thing, because you go to the gym and 2 days later you go to the gym again and then again, and you get stronger, healthier, better. The problems in the gym begin when you lift weights and a minute later you lift more weights and more weights and more weights. That's when the problems begin. That's when you get injured. That's when you get weaker rather than stronger. The problem, therefore, is not the stress. The problem, rather, is the lack of recovery, whether it's in the gym, physiologically, or in life, psychologically. We're very good at dealing with stress. What's happening in the modern world today, the problem in the modern world today, is that we don't have enough time for recovery. And therefore, our metaphorical muscles don't grow, but actually disintegrate, just like it would happen if we were in the gym without recovery. Now, Martha, for your recovery, can be very different from what recovery is for me. You know, I may enjoy going to the beach and doing nothing. You know, for you, going to the beach and doing nothing may be more stress rather than
stressful, very stressful.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, whether recovery for you is climbing mountains or reading books or hanging out with friends, or going to the gym, it doesn't matter. But we need recovery in our lives always, and certainly during times of high stress, like the time we're going through now.
The problem is this becomes like a snowball and we're inside of it, you know, tumbling, and there's no pause for recuperation, as you say.
You know, it's very difficult for many people to pause, to stop this snowball. And why? Because they feel, oh, I have so much work to do, or I don't want to be left behind. And what I urge people to do, and what I also remind myself, is of the following metaphor. Imagine you're a racing driver and you go with your car around the lap again and again and again. And then after 40 laps, you're supposed to take a pit stop. You're supposed to take a pause, a break, but you don't want to, because if you take a break, what happens is that other cars continue and take over. What will happen if you don't take a break? Well, one of two things: either the tires will blow up or you will run out of fuel. This is exactly what's happening to us psychologically today as a society. So many people are running out of fuel. This is what it means to burn out. And what we have to do, we must take that pit stop. We must recover so that A, we can be happier, B, that we can be healthier, and C, so that we can sustain our performance. So also for long-term success, it's important to recover. You know, even God needed a day off. I think there is an important message here for us mere mortals.
Very good. It's the race against the machine. That was so tough, because I think that the majority of the audience is a tidbit like me, where we live with this amazing sense of urgency, of not being able to stop. And also something very interesting that I think must happen to a lot of people beyond me, which is, I feel that if you stop and think and sometimes regroup and sometimes touch base with your inner self, maybe you'll find something that you don't like. And therefore, you feel that you cannot give yourself that chance and that you cannot take that risk because you need to be functioning 24/7.
Yeah, you know, Martha, this is such an important point that you bring up, because so many of us experience it or fear it. I'll give you an example from a study. This was done by Jamie Pennybaker. Jamie Pennybaker is a professor at the University of Texas. And what he did was he gave people the following instructions. For the next 20 minutes, take a break. For the next 20 minutes, write about your most difficult experiences. Something that you went through, something that you're going through right now, something that you hadn't thought about for years, or that you can't stop thinking about it. It doesn't matter. But take 20 minutes to pause and to look inside and write about it. Grammar doesn't matter. No one's going to see it. So you just write whatever comes to mind and heart. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What do you want to do about it? Whatever. The following day they come in and they write about this again. Again, another pause for 20 minutes. And they do it for 4 days. Basically journaling about their difficult experiences. And here is what happens. Initially, when he did the study, he was extremely concerned when he started to get the data back, because what he found was that the anxiety levels went up significantly as a result of this pause. However, he continued to test it. And within a week, anxiety levels started to go down. And very quickly, it went below the original level and it leveled off at a place that is lower for the next, for the next year, which is how long they measured it for. In other words, initially there was a spike in anxiety and then there was healing. And this is a very important study to keep in mind, because the pauses, yes, very often bring something up that we wanted to keep in check, that we didn't want to deal with. But not dealing with it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. Not dealing with it means that in the short term, we may be better off, but in the long term, we're paying a price. So taking these pauses has the same effect. Yes, initially it may be somewhat unpleasant. However, that's how we grow. That's how we develop. That's how we cultivate calm. That's how we cultivate happiness over time.
Yeah.
Short-term price, long-term benefit.
You left me thinking. You left me thinking. There's another thing that I love in your book, how important it is to create your happy moments and your happy spots. So how do you call them?
Happiness boosters.
Exacto, los boosters de alegría during your day and during your week and during your life, because if it's not part of your schedule and part of the agenda, it's usually in a drawer and it's the last thing on our list, not understanding that living your passion is so important to build your own happiness. And you talk about passion and strengths. So explain.
Yeah. So, Martha, first of all, the important point to understand here is that when it comes to happiness, small changes can make a big difference. I talked about how short recoveries can help us grow even if we're living a stressful life. It doesn't have to be radical change. It doesn't have to be extreme transformation of our life to increase our levels of happiness. Small changes make a big difference. Now, within this idea of small changes, we can introduce happiness boosters. Happiness boosters are short injections of things that we do that we're passionate about, that we're good at, that we enjoy doing. So, for example, Martha, it could be working on your art. You're passionate about it, you're good at it, and you enjoy doing it. Now, introducing these happiness boosters, these what I call islands of sanity throughout our day, that can help us experience everything else more positively. I could have the most difficult of days, pressure and stress and, going out of my mind. And then all I would need maybe is 15 minutes or 30 minutes of sitting down with a book. My passion is reading, sitting down with a book, and I go back and I recenter. This for me is an island of sanity.
Yeah.
And it's important, as you mentioned, to introduce these islands of sanity on a regular basis. Once again, remind yourself to do it. You can put it in your schedule. Do it on a regular basis. In other words, repetition, so that it permeates, it becomes part of you, part of your brain, by becoming a ritual.
I was laughing because I was thinking of the tremendous amount of mothers nowadays that have their kids at homeschooling because of the situation, and that probably find their happy spot just taking a shower, and the next thing they hear is, "Ma, ma, 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 why did you close the door? Ma, open the door, ma, open the door." Entonces, how important for those women as well to find and to create these happy boosters.
And Martha, it's important for them to find these happiness boosters, not just for themselves. Yes, first and foremost for themselves, also for their children. They actually will be better mothers if they put aside time for themselves, if they can recover, if they can have those boosters, if they can have islands of sanity throughout their crazy busy lives.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, are we finished with strengths and passions?
Just one more thing I want to say about this, because you spoke, and it's so important to speak about mothers. There's a therapist from middle of the 20th century, a child psychologist from England. His name is Donald Winnicott. And Donald Winnicott famously talked about the good enough mother. Not the perfect mother, the good enough mother. And it's very important concept to keep in mind. Once again, always
but certainly during these times. Why? Because what children need are not perfect mothers or perfect fathers. Because what would a perfect, so to speak, mother or father do? They would always be attentive to them. Every need that the child has, they would fulfill. Now, is that a good thing for the child? No, it's not, because they wouldn't learn how to deal with difficulties. They wouldn't learn how to regulate their own emotions. They would learn that mommy can solve everything or daddy can fix everything. That's not healthy. What children need are imperfect parents. They need imperfect mother and father. They need good enough parents, of course, who love them, of course, who care for them, and who also leave space for them to deal with difficulties, with hardships and challenges. You know, just like when you go to the gym and you lift 0 weight, you will not get stronger. You need resistance in order to get stronger. Children as well, they need resistance. They need challenges in life in order to grow stronger, to become more resilient, to become more independent, which is ultimately our goal as parents.
Claro. And I don't want everybody to get me wrong. Don't give children a hard time.
No, but you know, Maria Montessori said it nicely. She said, don't do for the children what they can do for themselves.
That's lovely.
Now, obviously, if there is something that they cannot do and they will collapse without our help, of course we need to help. We're their parents, but minimize help as much as possible.
So the majority of the audience is either in Mexico, certain parts of Latin America, which is basically the same thing, and some are in the United States. So right now, we have so many external reasons to be unhappy, and let me give you a list. So in Mexico, we're so worried about our government. We're worried about our economy and the lack of support that we've had. Many businesses are closing. Many people are worried about their financial future. Kids are home, schooling at home. There's a lot of unemployment. We're worried about our health. We're worried about the health of our family. In the States, you know, half of the country is upset because Trump hasn't conceded, or because Biden is the new president, and vice versa. In Latin America, same thing. We have an amazing death toll because of COVID. So the list of external factors that we can believe are interrupting our path to happiness is there, and it's real.
Yeah.
So how do you put into perspective everything that's out there that makes you so unhappy?
Okay, good. No, this is the question to ask during this time. What essentially is happening now is that we're going through a global trauma. And the question is, what do we do with it? You know, in my classes, most of my students, not all, but most of my students are psychology majors. And I always ask them this question, and I always ask, put your hand up if you know what PTSD is. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Just about everyone puts their hand up, whether they're psychology majors or not. And then I say, okay, put your hand down. I have a second question. This time, put your hand up if you know what PTG is. Almost no hand goes up. Even the psychologists don't know what PTG is. PTG is post-traumatic growth. Now, here is the thing.
I thought you were going to say post-traumatic globally. Okay, growth.
It is that too. So post-traumatic growth is twice as likely as post-traumatic stress disorder if, and this is a big if, two things happen. First of all, we know about the possibility, about the existence of post-traumatic growth. In other words, we know that it's even, that it can happen, because if we don't, it's less likely to happen. So that's the first thing we need to know that it's possible. The second thing, we need to understand what conditions we can put in place to make post-traumatic growth more likely. people, even psychologists, are not aware of the existence of post-traumatic growth, and they don't know what conditions they need to put in place, which means that traumas will end in disintegration rather than in growth, in negative consequences rather than positive consequences. Now, what are some of the conditions? The first condition we need to put in place when it comes to experiencing trauma, we need to accept and embrace the hardship and the difficulty, not fight it. Give ourselves the permission to be human. Allow ourselves to experience sadness or stress or anger or frustration. Step number one. Step number two, we need to cultivate strong relationships. Whether it's online relationships through Zoom or whether it's by phone or letter writing, we need to cultivate strong relationships because strong relationships help us grow from trauma. Another thing that we can do is exercise regularly. When we exercise regularly, it's not just our body that becomes stronger, our mind becomes stronger, and we're better able to deal with hardships and difficulties. And the other thing that we need to do is find things to be grateful for. Even in difficult situations, even if we find small thing that we can appreciate, then that will help us overcome difficulties. These are some of the things, and this is really the purpose of the science of happiness during difficult times. A, to make us aware that growth is possible, even as we're going through all these very difficult experiences. And two, to give us the conditions that we can put in place to grow from hardship.
Yeah, I gave a conference on Saturday, and somebody asked me what was like my biggest lesson during these last 9 months. And I said two things. The first one was, I am amazed of how everybody, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you do, all of us have discovered how creative and adaptable we are. And I think that is amazing. That is amazing. And second, I left it, on a high note, trying to give people hope. And what I wanted to tell them is, I really want everybody to believe, to know that you have what it takes to deal with whatever comes. Because I think that self-confidence is always, undermining us and always making us believe that we won't be able. And if you look at your history and the hardships that you've been through, no matter how difficult this one seems and how much bigger to everything else that you've lived, that you can, and you will find a way, no matter how, gloomy it looks. You have what it takes to handle whatever life throws at you.
And Martha, what you did there was you gave people hope. And the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope.
Tal, can we be friends forever?
Yeah, it's a deal.
It's a deal. Can we talk again soon?
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. People are super excited. I'm sure you'll see it on social media. Si quieren seguir a Tal, es Tal Ben-Shahar con H intermedia. Seguramente lo ven en mi timeline de Twitter. O en Instagram es happiness.studies.academy. Si quieren seguir todo lo que hace Tal Ben-Shahar con su gente. Tal, thank you so much. I send you a big kiss and a big Mexican hug all the way to where you are. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. You've made us happier people and wiser people this morning.
Thank you very much, Martha.
I send you a big kiss. Say goodbye to Mexico. See you soon.
See you, Mexico. I can't wait to visit.
Absolutely. We'll be waiting for you with our arms open.